My name's Angelina, and if you had met me a few years ago, you would have thought I was just another quiet, studious girl who kept her head down, focused on school, and didn't bother anyone. I wasn't the type to stir drama. I wasn't the type to make enemies. And I definitely wasn't the type of person you'd expect to end up plotting revenge. But life has a strange way of teaching you who you really are, especially when the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones who betray you the deepest. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, the kind where everyone knew everyone, where Friday night football was practically a religion, and where secrets didn't stay secret for long. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't struggling either. Dad worked long hours at an auto shop he eventually managed to buy, and Mom was a nurse who worked the night shift most of my childhood. On the outside, we looked like your average hardworking American family. But on the inside, things were messy. I was the middle child, which, if you've ever been one, you know what that means. My older brother Michael was the golden boy. Straight A's, captain of the basketball team, homecoming king. My parents never said it out loud, but they didn't need to. Their faces told the story every time he walked into the room. Pride, admiration, pure joy. And then there was my younger sister Lily. She was the baby, the delicate one. Everyone spoiled her. Not just Mom and Dad, but relatives, neighbors, even teachers at school. And then there was me, Angelina, stuck in the middle, overlooked, always compared but never celebrated. I was smart, sure, but my grades weren't as flawless as Michael's. I was kind, yes, but not adorable like Lily. I was just there. At first, I thought being invisible was a kind of blessing. No one expected much from me, so I had space to do my own thing. I buried myself in books, taught myself to draw, and found comfort in long walks through the woods behind our house. I wasn't lonely exactly, but I carried this constant ache, the kind that comes from knowing you're never really anyone's first choice. The older I got, the more obvious it became. Birthdays came and went with little fanfare compared to my siblings. When Michael got into college, my parents threw him a huge party. When Lily got her first role in a community theater play, they bought her flowers, balloons, the whole deal. When I won an art competition at school, a polite clap, a quick good job, and then back to whatever else they were doing. By the time I hit high school, the resentment had quietly settled into my bones. I didn't act out. I didn't scream or demand attention. I just learned to watch, to notice, to tuck things away in my mind. That habit of watching instead of speaking would later become my greatest weapon. But let me back up a little. Because before the revenge, before the betrayal, there were years of small slights that built up. 16 is supposed to feel special. Sweet 16, right? For most girls, it's a milestone. A big party, a cake, friends screaming Taylor Swift lyrics while someone films on their iPhone. For me, my 16th birthday was a last-minute dinner at Applebee's, where Michael spent most of the night bragging about his latest game, and Lily whined that she didn't like her food. My parents argued in the car ride home about the bill. That night, I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, and something cracked inside me. Not a dramatic break, just a tiny fracture. I realized if I wanted to feel special, if I wanted to feel seen, I'd have to do it myself. So I threw myself into art. Drawing became my escape, my therapy, my rebellion. Teachers noticed. My friends noticed. Strangers online noticed when I started sharing my sketches. Everyone seemed to notice, except my family. Nun Day, a local gallery, announced a youth art exhibit. I worked my butt off and submitted 3 pieces. To my shock, not only did I get in, I won first place. My name was in the newspaper. For a brief moment, I thought, finally, they'll see me. They'll be proud. Nat dinner that night. I laid the paper on the table, heart pounding. I won, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Dad glanced at the article, grunted something like, "That's nice," and went back to asking Michael about basketball practice. Mom smiled faintly and told Lily to finish her broccoli. That was it. It sounds small, right? But in that moment, I felt something shift again, sharper this time. It was the realization that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for them. You might think this is just a sad story about a girl with neglectful parents. But the real betrayal, it came years later, after I thought I'd escaped. When I graduated high school, I didn't get a big party like Michael. I didn't even get flowers like Lily, but I got into college, on scholarship. It was my ticket out. I packed my bags, hugged them goodbye, and promised myself I'd build a life where I mattered. College was freedom. I made friends, found mentors who actually believed in me, and started dreaming about a future in art therapy. For the first time, I wasn't just the middle child. I was Angelina, talented, funny, ambitious. But just when I started to feel like I was finally standing on solid ground, the rug got yanked out from under me. It happened one cold afternoon during my sophomore year. I got a call from a neighbor back home, Mrs. Turner, who'd known me since I was little. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Angelina, I don't know how to tell you this, but your parents, they've been talking about you to people around town. They said the scholarship money you got, well, they've been telling folks they deserve it, that you owe them, and that if you don't start sending money home, they might do something drastic." At first, I thought she must be mistaken. My parents weren't perfect, but they weren't that cruel. Right? But then I checked my bank account, and my stomach dropped. Because there it was, transactions I hadn't made, money withdrawn. My savings, the little I'd scraped together from part-time jobs and tutoring, was disappearing. And who had access to my account? My parents. That was the moment I stopped being the quiet, overlooked girl. That was the moment I decided. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, I'd show them just how much I did. This is where the revenge begins. The night I discovered my bank account had been drained, I sat frozen at my tiny dorm room desk, staring at the screen like it might suddenly correct itself. Numbers don't lie, though. The balance was nearly empty. Weeks of tutoring, long hours at the campus library, the little I'd set aside for emergencies, gone. My hands were shaking as I called my mom. "Hey, sweetie?" she answered casually, like nothing was wrong. "Mom?" I blurted out, trying to steady my voice. Did you and Dad take money out of my account?" There was silence on the line for a beat too long. Then she sighed. "Angelina, you know how hard things have been. Your father's hours got cut back. Bills are piling up. We're drowning here, and you're off at school like none of this affects you." My chest tightened. "That's my money. I worked for it. You wouldn't even be in college without us," she snapped suddenly, her tone shifting from guilt to venom. "We sacrificed everything for you. The least you can do is help us out." I sat there in stunned silence. Help us out! Like I hadn't spent my entire childhood being invisible so Michael and Lily could shine. Like my scholarship, something I had earned, was somehow theirs by default. "Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. "That money was for my rent, my food. You had no right," but she didn't flinch. "Don't be dramatic. You'll figure it out. You always do." And then she hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. My own mother had stolen from me, and didn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it. In the weeks that followed, things unraveled fast. I picked up extra shifts at the library and skipped meals to stretch what little money I had left. My friends noticed I was quieter, thinner, but I brushed off their concern. How do you tell people that your own parents are stealing from you? Every phone call home became a minefield. Dad would grumble about responsibility and how family takes care of family. Mom would guilt-trip me about Lily's theater classes or Michael's grad school applications. Apparently, my role was to fund their dreams while mine collapsed. I stopped answering their calls. I stopped going home for breaks. I even started avoiding social media, because every time I saw pictures of them, smiling at Lily's performances, cheering at Michael's games, I felt that old ache flare into full-blown rage. They hadn't just overlooked me anymore. They were actively sabotaging me, and then came the final straw. It arrived one gray afternoon, slipped under my dorm door in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notice from my bank. My parents had taken out a loan. In my name. I remember my knees giving out as I sank onto the floor. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They had forged my signature, tied me to thousands of dollars of debt I hadn't agreed to, and left me holding the bag. I felt sick. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. Imagine the two people who are supposed to protect you, deliberately setting you up to fail. That's what it was, a setup. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring out the window at the cold, dark campus, and something inside me hardened. If they wanted me to be the forgotten daughter, the expendable one, fine. But they were about to learn that being invisible has its advantages. People don't see you coming, watching and planning. The thing about revenge is, it's not quick. Not if you want it to last. And I wanted mine to hurt. I started small, gathering information. I requested my credit reports, traced every account in my name, and documented every shady transaction. I dug through old emails, bank statements, anything that showed a paper trail. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Turns out, this wasn't the first time they'd used me. When I was still in high school, they'd quietly opened a joint account and used my social security number for family expenses. Back then, I didn't understand the paperwork they shoved in front of me. Now, I realized I'd been nothing but a tool to them, but information is power. And for the first time, I wasn't powerless. I played the dutiful daughter on the phone, nodding, agreeing, pretending I was too busy with classes to notice what they were doing. Meanwhile, I built my case. I visited legal aid offices on campus, asked quiet questions to mentors, and learned exactly what counted as financial fraud. And slowly, a plan started forming. One weekend, I caved and went home for a family dinner, thinking maybe face-to-face we could work things out. Maybe some part of me still wanted to believe they'd see me as their daughter, not their bank account. I walked into the house and instantly felt like a stranger. Michael's trophies lined the mantel. Lily's playbills were framed on the wall. There wasn't a single photo of me. Not one. At dinner, I finally brought it up. "Why did you take out a loan in my name?" I asked, voice steady but low. The room went silent. Michael raised an eyebrow. Lily looked confused. Mom set down her fork, unfazed. "Because we needed it," she said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "That's fraud," I said firmly. "It's illegal." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Don't you dare lecture us. We raised you, fed you, put clothes on your back. You owe us." Something inside me snapped. I stood up, heart pounding, and said the words I'd been holding back my whole life. "No, I don't owe you anything. You owe me. And you're about to find out just how badly you screwed up." Then I grabbed my coat and walked out. That was the night I stopped being their daughter. That was the night I became their reckoning. I knew I couldn't just cut them off. That would be too easy for them. They'd spin the story, make me look like the ungrateful child, and keep living off their lies. No, I needed to expose them, to make sure everyone saw who they really were. I wanted them to feel what I had felt my entire life: small, powerless, invisible. And so, the revenge plan began to take shape. When I decided I was done, I didn't want fury that faded after an hour. I wanted consequences that would stick. So I treated it like a job. I made lists. I made spreadsheets. I collected receipts. I built a timeline. If they were going to try to gaslight me, to call me dramatic or ungrateful, I was going to make sure they couldn't argue with paper. The first move was practical: secure the money that was still mine. I called my bank and froze my accounts. I shut down the card they had been using. I disputed the obvious charges, the ones for which passenger names and seat numbers were the smoking gun. Business class, 4 seats, a charge that showed up on my phone while I was washing vomit out of a hospital mattress at 3 a.m. The absurdity of it stung, but it also worked in my favor. If someone has the gall to charge champagne and reclining seats to your card while you're working doubles, they're sloppy. Sloppy people leave trails. Next, the emotional pivot. I did not want one more pity-filled phone call where someone told me how we raised you, like that phrase justified theft. I wanted clarity, so I opened my laptop and started typing an invoice. I know how that sounds. She invoiced her family. It reads funny on the surface, almost petty. But it was the most clinical thing I'd done in months. Greasy with paper trail and numbers, and the kind of sterile distance that keeps you from losing your head. I itemized everything I could prove. $600, dress purchased for Kayla's engagement, never repaid. $2,500, emergency loan to Kayla and Derek during unemployment. $800, Dad's MRI deductible paid out of pocket. $420, groceries and household expenses covered on my visa. $4,800, 4 business class tickets to Hawaii charged without consent. $1,200 for. I wrote it as if I were billing a client. I put dates, transaction IDs where I had them, and I attached screenshots. I gave them 30 business days to reimburse me. And I wrote, bluntly, what would happen next. If they failed to repay, I would escalate to formal disputes, file fraud claims, and, if necessary, provide documentation to anyone who asked. Banks, employers, and authorities. Then I did something else I'd never pictured myself doing. I hit send to the family group chat. The notification chimed, and I watched it sit there. A message in a thread that usually contained memes and baby photos, and the occasional passive-aggressive, "When are you visiting?" After I sent it, there was a bubbling chaos of reactions. Exclamations, the eye-roll emoji, the classic, "Are you serious?" From Kayla, and my mother's immediate hurt, or the performance of hurt. "Abigail, this is so painful. This will ruin us." My phone lit up with the noise of them breathing fire. They assumed I would cave as always. When Kayla texted, "What kind of person invoices their own family?" I replied with one sentence, "The kind who got tired of being their ATM." Then I locked my phone in a drawer and went to work. For 2 days, the house that was my family's home became a war zone electronically. They called, they texted, they tried to get people on their side. Michael texted me like he did when we were kids. Only now there was a false, performative righteousness in his words. "We did everything for you. You owe us." I saved each screenshot. Every call I didn't pick, every voicemail with a trembling apology, hit my saved folder. I was building an archive. And then Marissa messaged me. Derek's ex. The woman people in town had always whispered about, sharp as a tack, with a job that forced her to be precise, slid into my DMs like an ally from a distant battlefield. She said 2 words, "We need to talk." Attached was a PDF. I didn't open it for 5 minutes. I made tea. I sat down. I reminded myself to breathe. Then I clicked. What she sent me were not the vague accusations I'd been stewing on for months. These were receipts and screenshots, emails triggered from an account I'd never seen, bank transfers timestamped in the small hours, a ledger of misappropriated funds that traced a path straight to Derek, the same Derek who smiled too wide in family photos and said too many jokes to be trusted. The ledger showed a pattern, transfers out of a family emergency account, withdrawals marked Derek expenses, payments to crypto exchanges, a small torrent of money redirected into accounts Marissa had reason to believe were his. There were also messages from my mother, pleading, bargaining, begging Marissa not to expose anything. "We'll fix this," one message read. "Abigail doesn't need to know." The implication was a knife. They all knew. They had been managing the damage by patching it with my money and blame shifting with the rest. That night, I printed everything. When the printer spat out page after page, the sound felt obscene in my quiet apartment. Receipts, transfer confirmations, screenshots of texts begging for hush money, a physical book of their worst choices. I put a rubber band around the stack and slept on the floor with the lights off for the first time in months, because the dark kept me steady. I called the bank back in the morning. I filed fraud reports. I told them everything I had. They told me to hold, they promised to investigate, and they walked me through the paperwork I'd need to make a proper legal case if it came to that. I felt a weird, rational kind of relief. The engines of bureaucracy are slow, but they are indifferent. Indifference is a friend when you want the truth to be called by its name. Once the bank had a copy, I forwarded Marissa's files to a few key people. Aunt Linda, who had always treated me like a daughter, and anonymously, to my dad's employer's HR department with a short redacted packet. I did the math in my head. If my dad's job took a hit, their ability to cover up would fracture. It wasn't me trying to be cruel. It was methodical, I won't lie. The aftermath was ugly. My dad's phone started blowing up with calls from colleagues. His name vanished from the company site. No dramatic firing notice, no loud dismissal in a crowd. Just a quiet erasure. I didn't do a victory lap. I watched from a distance, detached, while a man who'd always used bluster and threats to move through the world found himself without an audience. Derek, of course, didn't handle being cornered with grace. There was an attempt to rent a car in Maui with my frozen card. The fraud department flagged it and contacted me. Would I press charges? They asked. I told them to document everything, that I wasn't done. Not yet. Kayla went nuclear. She texted obscene amounts of venom, threats cloaked as concern. You'll regret this. And the classic, we did so much for you. I screenshotted the texts, cataloged them, and sent them to the folder labeled evidence. I blocked her, but not before letting the chat thread sit, untouched, like a wound left to scab. Then came the confrontations. My parents showed up at my door twice. The first time was Dad alone, in a Hawaiian shirt that made him look like a man who'd never lost a fight. He knocked. I peered through the peephole, saw the stiffness in his shoulders, and decided I would not supply the drama he wanted. I didn't answer. He left after 7 minutes. The second time was with Mom. She clutched receipts and a sheaf of papers as if that might help her plead better. When I opened the door, because after all this was still their child standing in my hallway, Mom's voice was close to breaking. "You need to talk to us," she stammered. "Please?" "Why?" I asked. My voice was calm, as flat as the floor. "So you can cry and expect forgiveness? Or so you can hand me receipts and tell me you're sorry while you keep the money?" Dad advanced, jaw set. "This is spiteful," he said. "Freezing the card, the invoice, that's not how family behaves." I didn't raise my voice. I let the words land. "Family doesn't forge loans in a child's name," I said. "Family doesn't use their child's work to bail out gambling losses. Family doesn't gaslight a person into thinking they're ungrateful for wanting their own life." They sputtered. They tried to shame me for embarrassing them. For a moment, I almost felt pity, a human flicker at the edges. Then I remembered the long list of nights I'd stayed awake, counting bills. I remembered scraping by while my kitchen was renovated and my siblings took weekend trips. I closed the door with my hand, not slammed, but with a finality that felt like a gavel drop. For 2 days, they left me alone. The silence was a new kind of pressure. I expected them to come back with lawyers, with tears, with an offer of restitution. Instead, they resorted to something more petty, a smear campaign. Family friends called with confused questions. My mother let a conversation with an aunt turn into a simple narrative. "Abby's angry. She's blaming us for success she doesn't appreciate." It was the classic backstory. Paint the bailer as the villain and you get sympathy. But my archive kept growing. Marissa's file delivered the kind of proof one can't easily spin away. Derek's misappropriation, combined with the forged signature and the business class charges on my card, created a picture of more than a few isolated bad choices. It showed a pattern. A system, a family apparatus designed to appropriate my labor and my money, to package it as love and responsibility while the internal narrative was, "You owe us." I started therapy in the quiet afternoons between shifts. I needed a place to be honest without being judged, to say the words out loud. They stole from me. The therapist, patient, fierce, taught me a few things that made all the difference. 1. Boundaries are not punishments. 2. Evidence is your friend when memory is weaponized. 3. You are allowed to protect yourself without being cruel. The call came on a Tuesday. My mom's voice cracked through the phone. "The bank froze our accounts." They're investigating us? What did you do? I almost laughed. No, Mom. What you did is finally catching up to you. Stealing from me wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. Then I hung up. From there, everything unraveled. My dad's job reputation tanked. My mom was pushed out of community groups. Michael lost his grad school spot, and Lily's theater program cut ties when funding dried up. One domino after another. For once, I wasn't the powerless daughter. I was the reason their empire of lies collapsed. A year later, I had my degree, my own apartment, and my life back. My parents? Bankrupt, disgraced, and irrelevant. When I ran into my mom at the grocery store, she whispered, "We're still family." I shook my head. Family protects you, loves you, not bleeds you dry. We're not family anymore. And I walked away, no regrets, no guilt, just freedom. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was unstoppable.